Hey everybody, it's Jeff here. Episode 159, and I'm alone. So next week is 160. Can you believe that? 160? Jeez. I mean, where does this go? I mean, where does the time go with this? I cannot believe 160 already. That just hit me a few minutes ago. Anyway, for me, it's Wednesday. It's 10:59 p.m. And this morning I wrote Jeremy and said, I wouldn't mind steering this by myself tonight. So if you think that sitting down at a microphone in an empty room, half dark, and talking for 2 hours is easy, try it. It ain't easy. But this is kind of like my reflective episode, I guess, is what I could call it. The other night when I got off of the live show, a little bit of time went by. About 4 or 5 a.m., I sat down. I was going through some emails just because I couldn't sleep. And I have an email, basically a folder, where a lot of the emails that people send me, where if I've given out my email to somebody or I've posted on a message board or messaged somebody with it, they've written me and we have a little dialogue for a while, and then, just like any email exchange, it eventually tapers off. But some of these questions I've never answered. In fact, a lot of them I've never answered. It's been like 2 or 3 months since I've even looked at some of them. And as I started going through them, I started being reminded of things that maybe I had half touched on here and there that people are asking about. And it was kind of a memory lane trip for me, which is a little weird. But, in that sense, it was a little, I don't know, melancholy, I guess is the word for it, because I come off this mic every week. You do 160 of these, and you do a live show on Sunday, both of which we love doing. I don't engage this subject like I used to. Looking back on some of these emails and being reminded of some things that I hadn't thought about in a while. I guess these days, for me, in the way of personal weirdness, there hasn't been much going on of real, pinnacle episodes, I guess you'd say. For me, there hasn't been any highly provocative weirdness. And when that doesn't happen for me, life tends to happen. Which is, I got to admit, kind of nice. And there's been some good stuff at work. There's been some good stuff in my art world project stuff, all of which you'll see probably at some point when everything starts to roll. But it's allowed me to pursue other stuff, artwork, and in particular music. I mean, not only my band, but here's weird for you. You want time and weird? I went to see my son's band play their first gig last night in Baltimore at a club that I would say I maybe played my second or third gig at. And there I am standing there watching my son with a bass strapped on going to town. So it was, there's been a lot of reflecting on and revisiting things for me in this and seeing where I was before. And I would say in particular in this, I've kind of evolved out of, the debate ring. I've evolved out of even commenting on cases that I look at on the net and I go, that's total horseshit. So I just don't even care. That used to really insult me. And it just doesn't bother me anymore. And when you think about, and I want you all to think about this, because this is an important thing. We all like this subject. We're all interested in it. And for a lot of us, it's affected us personally. But I think the thing that we can't lose sight of is letting it become a main focal point. Is it important? Absolutely. But so is the rest of your life. And it being quiet around here, I've had time to reflect not only on where this is going for me, but that, life is going by. I'm going to be 45 years old in April. And, and I've spent over half of that time in this. And so, and I don't feel, I feel like I've had personal epiphanies with this stuff, and I feel like I've dug into it, but do I have anything in my hands that I can hold up and show you and go, look at this, and say, look, this is something. Most of what I feel that we've done on this show is to, in part, talk about what's wrong with the research and what's wrong with procedures and what we should be doing, but very little on, of solidity to what is this? What are we? What is going on? And so these days, I got to be honest with everybody and say it hasn't engaged me lately because I don't feel like there's a whole lot going on for me personally, nor in this field that's of great substance. And it's been easy just to do life, and it's been kind of nice, to be honest with you, as I said. So, but these questions kind of made me look back a little bit, which is something you have to do when you've been around. And some of these questions I do want people to get answers for, and I know they're listening because I emailed most of them and said, listen to this week's show. And so that's it for me. This is not, a lead up to anything traumatic for the show, but do I feel like we're still being productive? Yeah. Do I feel like there's still new things to find out? Absolutely. Are they coming anytime soon? I don't know. It's been a little dry for me. At least that's my feeling. And I've communicated that to Jeremy as well. He knows that that I've got a lot going on. That is not a distraction. It's more, let's take a step back from this stuff for a while and let it be and see what happens. And so after this break, which we do every week, we're going to start off with some questions that people have sent me and I've neglected to answer. So we'll be right back after this.
If you record audio for any purpose, chances are you want it to be heard. You want to attract the largest audience possible who can hear your message. That's where we come in. We're CyberEars.com, a revolutionary internet service that will host your audio files and help you promote and track its popularity. Considering hosting a podcast to the world? We have all the automated tools to make the process as simple and easy as it can be. No technical mumbo-jumbo to work out. CyberEars.com does all the work for you. You record it, we take care of the rest. So don't delay. Go to CyberEars.com today and register for a free trial account. Upload your audio files and get heard. With CyberEars.com, it's your audio on your terms.
And we're back. And, being as we're on reflective things, here's something to say about that message you just heard, Cyber Ears. Miles and everybody at Cyber Ears, thank you guys for being, the stand-up people you are and hosting this show for us and going above and beyond all the time. You guys are great. And folks, if you're thinking about hosting a podcast, I'm serious. These people are fantastic. So go check them out. CyberEars.com. So anyway, let's take a look at these questions because, as I said, these kind of some of these made me really start pondering and walking down memory lane with some of this stuff. And so, I'm going to start off here with Jason because Jason asked a question that's a little more recent, but it's not nostalgic, but it's something that I think maybe a couple people have asked me and I haven't really answered. So he said, you have spoken of the Shrouded Man now several times, and I know that you'd originally said talking about what was communicated to you was off limits. How do you account for the beating you seem to have gotten before and yet not since? Because I have talked about some of that stuff. And the answer there is some of the stuff I get the sense is okay to say because it's very vague, I guess. There has been some rather pointed stuff, and again, it's personal stuff to me that's been outlook changing for me, radically outlook changing for me in as far as dealing with people, understanding me, understand, more about myself. And that's something that I have noticed that maybe that is something that I can put out and say, look at this. Well, this is the thing you can look at is, how it affects you. You have to look at how this whole thing has an impact upon your outlook and the way you perceive everyone and everything around you. Paradigm altering is something we hear a lot of in this field, and it is that. But it's that in so many more ways than what you might think. It's more than there's somebody else in the building. It's more than that. It's more about, what do I fear? How do I fear it? What's the purpose in that? Why would I be so afraid of that? Why do these things often relegate themselves to spiritual thoughts and or end up there? How do I account for the beating I seem to have gotten before and yet not since? There's been certain parts of it that I haven't broached that I get the sense would be the problems. And those are, again, they're personal, but I'll be honest with you, there's been a couple of things I have said that I just said, to hell with it, and whatever happens, happens, and yet nothing has happened. The only thing I can tell you is I don't know. I don't have a good answer for that. I think I could think of a couple things right off the top of my head that I could say that likely something there would be a repercussion for it. Whether or not it would be the same thing I got before or not, I don't know. I honestly don't. But all that said, I try to be as general as I can about it and still get the point across. I don't know what the reason for, I should say, communicating certain parts of it are fine, one-on-one. In the mass communication sense of the show, I do feel the need that I should be general and that I should, what I can relate, I have. In other words, the whole thing about the fractals, which everybody got in such an uproar about, that was open. That was wide open. I was fine with that. In fact, that was encouraged. Aside from that, everything's been fairly general. So that's probably the reason, but that's only a guess. I honestly don't know. I don't know exactly how that line of demarcation works, but there is a line on a couple of topics I can kind of understand it and see it, but in others, no. So that's the best way I know to answer that. You don't ever quite know. I get a feeling about some things like I shouldn't say this or that, but it's not like I have a voice in my head saying, shut up. It's not like that. So anyway, that's as best as I can answer that. The short of it is, I don't know. I know that when I did get the marks all over my back, that I had spilled everything on the show and recorded it, and we were due to push it out, and then all of a sudden there this is. So, yeah, I don't know. That's a damn good question, and if I ever see this thing again, maybe that should be something I should try and ask. The next one here comes from Lynn. That's L-I-N, not L-Y-N. Can you describe more about your Gulf Breeze sighting in 1998? And then she quoted this. This is, I'm not sure where she's quoting this from. As according to columnist Carol Baker of the Pensacola Beach Insider, Ritzman grabbed his camera recorder and, quote, shot an approximate 13-second video of a UFO flying from west to east between Pensacola Beach and Gulf Breeze. ... This video shows a bright white silver object traveling quite fast across the sky. Toward the end of the video, the object seems to tilt or turn, showing a bright flash as it catches the sun's rays. After that, it appears to fade, probably turning away. It pursues an erratic course until it's out of sight. The object does not appear to be an airplane approaching Pensacola Airport, since its speed and altitude are too high and too fast for a conventional aircraft. Unquote. That probably came out of, I want to say, Joseph Trainer's newsletter that he posted a long time ago. UFO report something, or I can't remember where that. I remember reading that, something about a Maryland man, Jeff Ritzman, vacationing in Florida. I was in a cafe, and it was during the Gulf Breeze conference that year. It was during the conference, I was down there for the conference, and I was sitting there eating lunch. And as a matter of fact, the day of that sighting, maybe two empty booths down from me, was Whitley Strieber and Jim Mars. And I don't think there were many other people in this little cafe at the time. And I looked to my left because I saw something moving. And of course, you're in Gulf Breeze, so you're always peaked for something. And had the camcorder sitting there on the table, and I saw something move. And so immediately, rather than take the chance, I immediately jumped up, knocked the door open, and started shooting. What I saw looked like a ball, or it wasn't elongated like an airplane to me. It looked more like an upright cylinder or a ball. It was kind of hard to tell through the viewfinder, but it was definitely a stubby object, not something long like an airplane. And you do see a lot of airplanes around that area, especially in that direction. And I shot it until in the viewfinder I look and I see a flash, and then I see kind of it looked like it kind of jagged away a little bit, and then I couldn't see it at all. It had simply disappeared right there. I didn't see it go down, up, left, or right. It was just simply not there. Now, I should say that could it have been a very distant airplane that then changed heading and had light reflect off of it? And at such time, when you get an object that, well, just a good for instance is some of these very chromy looking airplanes, they catch the sun very brightly. And after they turn away at a certain distance, the distance hazing and the color of the sky blends the plane in so perfectly that from a specific distance, you can't see it. Could that have been it? Yeah, it could have been that. I never really thought much about it. It became kind of the talk of the conference at the end, and I was asked to come up and talk about it. But in fact, I wasn't going to talk about anything that hadn't been analyzed, and who was going to do it? Who was going to do it? Me? I can't do it. It's my footage. And so I just said, well, I'd rather just not do that and wait until someone has a chance to actually take a look at it. It seemed odd on the video, but was it? I don't know. I'm sure someone in Gulf Breeze has a copy of it. I don't have a copy of it anymore. The camera was not mine. And ultimately, the footage ended up being owned by somebody else, and because it was their camera and their tape. But I did shoot it, and I think I was on the Art Bell show the next day or the day after that, and Linda Howe, I think asked me some questions, and that was it. It was real short, not a huge deal, but I did find out that the year after that, I know that Miss Baker, Carol Baker down there, she was kind of, at the time, she was kind of like the recording woman down there who would keep track of all the sightings and date them and all that sort of thing. And she had asked about a copy of it, and I said, yeah, sure. And she made a copy, and then later on, after I had no access to it, she sent me a copy of it. And so somewhere in the VCR, the big VCR tape cabinet, it's got to be there. I would have to dig through all those, and most of them are unlabeled crap that I recorded off the TV years ago. But apparently someone had done a follow-up on it, and I never did find out. I couldn't find anybody who could tell me, like, well, what did this person conclude about it? What did they say? I don't know. Gulf Breeze has gotten very quiet about the UFO thing. I don't even know if they do a conference down there anymore. I don't think they do. I had talked to Bland Pugh, as I said on the show a couple times before, about, what's it like down there? What's the UFO thing? What's going on? And it's very quiet. You might get something up from further up in the state, but not really much going on in Gulf Breeze, and it all seems to have kind of faded out. Curious. I don't know. That's essentially that sighting. There wasn't much to it, and I think these days I almost think you'd be hard pressed to find anything on Google about it, unless you looked up my name in Gulf Breeze or something. I don't know. I will tell you this, and here's something that I haven't said on the show before, but this disturbed me greatly some time ago. I talked to Jeremy about it. While I was staying there, over the course of a few days that I was there, it was overcast, by and large. We had a couple days where it was a little sunny, but it was that kind of, I don't know, hazy cloud cover. And I believe it might even have rained one of the days. I can't remember. I know it rained like hell before I got there, because the water down there is almost like the Caribbean. It's very, very blue, and the beach sands are white. It's a beautiful place. I love that place. And so the water was kind of brownish, and it was gray most of the time. Not a lot of sun that I can remember, and I didn't go out. I was inside at a cafe, and I'd walk across the parking lot and go back into the hotel where the conference was being held, and and essentially, it wasn't like I laid out on the beach or anything. I was barely outside, for Christ's sake. So it was a little odd that one day I woke up and I had a sunburn, and it was almost the classical, Close Encounters, one side of the face sunburn. I don't know how that would have happened, but I do remember my face peeling as I came home. It was literally peeling. And it was very red, and the other side was not. A couple of nights that I stayed there, as I said, never set foot on the beach. Now, if you're on, a parking lot that has a beachfront, it's a beachfront hotel, of course, sand does blow, and it gets in the street, it's in the curbs, it's across the parking lot. But it's not like you're trudging through it. It's just little particles here and there. And I certainly never climbed above with my clothes on, or with, or with shoes on. But yet there was more than one morning that I woke up there that there was sand in the bed, for absolutely no good reason at all. And I don't mean a little. I mean quite a bit. I don't remember it being on my feet per se, but it was in the bed, as if you had walked on the beach and you had, I don't know. I don't remember how this came up in my mind about any of that. But as I'm talking about this, I can still picture this in my head, that I have a weird, and this hit me very quickly when I was just thinking about it. All of a sudden, this just kind of flashed in there, of standing on the beach when I know I hadn't been on the beach, but I remember I have this fragment of some memory of standing on the beach. I don't remember. I remember standing there. I remember it being semi-dark, as in like very, very, very early morning. And I remember seeing this thing in the sky, and it's turning, and it's got little blue lights on it, and it's not high, and it's over the water, and it's just there. But that's all I got. It's not like I remember some grandiose, scenario after that. It's just that, yeah, I was on the beach, and yeah, I saw that, and yeah, I can picture it. But I can't qualify that as an actual memory. I don't know if that's, confabulation of my own memories telling me that that's real, or what that is. But when I first got that flash, it got my heart pounding. I was like, oh my God, yeah. it had that kind of feeling about it, but I got nothing else. And so I don't know what to make of that. I don't know if that's what really happened, or maybe I had some kind of dream not long after there that's coming back to me, or I just don't know. But I know that there was sand in the bed, and I had a sunburn on one side of my face. And we had seen no great sighting that weekend aside from the thing I recorded. That was it. I went to Shoreline Park every night that I was there. Nothing to see. No Bubba even. No even red light UFO dropping out the little white ones that you probably remember from shows like Sightings. I really wanted to see that. Just nothing happened. So that's it. I mean, that's as far as Gulf Breeze goes. That's it. I haven't been there in years now. I'd very much like to take another trip down just to check it out. But yeah, I don't know currently what's going on there. Maybe Bland Pew would be a good guest to get because I'd love to kind of revisit that case again. I recently posted video from YouTube of the small spherical UFO that I talked about on the show prior. And somebody had asked me, is there footage of any of that? There is, but it's slow motion. If we could get, maybe Dr. Maccabee can send me a clip of it in full speed, and you can get an idea of just how bizarre this thing moves. I mean, it'll blow your mind. If you blink, you'll miss it. It's pretty astounding stuff. So that's up on our message board at paratopia.net. Check that out. That's it as far as that goes, Lynn. I don't have a good memory of exactly what happened with that memory, or if that's even a valid memory for me. So I've got to be highly dubious about what that means. But those two different things, and of course I've talked about the pinpoint earthquakes that were down there that everyone seemed to feel, but individually, I guess, and I've come to think that there aren't tremors, that means something else, and I don't know what that could be. So there was weirdness, definitely weirdness down there, definitely a strange place. Nothing like Pine Bush. Gulf Breeze felt decidedly less in your face than Pine Bush did. Pine Bush seemed very in your face. Curious the difference in the two for me. But anyway, I want to get to Clive here. Clive says, when you first had heard of alien abduction, you'd said before that you thought the notion was ridiculous. Yet with all the weirdness you obviously recognized throughout your life, you had to know something was different. Was it such a stretch for you to consider the alien abduction syndrome? Yeah, actually it was. I had not really ever been that involved in like the contactee stuff, like the Adamski stuff. I had seen his photographs, and I'd certainly seen the film footage of what people called like the shape-shifting disc, and I didn't find any of that particularly interesting. But I know that I probably had first seen something about alien abduction at a MUFON symposium, probably, because I had been getting into it just a little bit, and I finally said, let me go to one of these things and just see what it's like. And then somebody mentioned that. I remember being like, oh, please, this is just one step more than a sighting. Like a sighting is a big deal. To see something that rare and to have that, like I could relate to that. I've seen UFOs in my life. I can relate to that. I can see where that would be important. Somebody saying that they had contact with what's inside of it just seemed like too much, like that's just one-upmanship there. I just didn't have any sense of that. And I did not equate the weirdness throughout my life. I mean, you say, I obviously recognized it. I did realize the weirdness. I saw it. I remember it. There were some of my most potent memories, but I didn't connect it with that. I don't know what I connected it with. In fact, to sit here and say I connected it with anything would be untrue. I don't know what it was. I had no connective tissue at all to connect the dots. It wasn't until an event with my wife that I actually went, that's what that all is, because it feels the same. It behaves the same. There are similar aspects to it. That's got to be what that is. And so the more I connected the dots, the more, we've talked about how you engage this and it pushes back. Lee back in the days used to say, shit doesn't stink till you stir it. And that's the truth. That's what kind of happened. And that's what kind of set all of this in motion for me so many years ago now. Was it a stretch? Yeah, it was a stretch, but, I knew something was different. I didn't know what that was. From being a little kid, I didn't really talk about that stuff until I got a little older, with other people other than, mom and dad. I would tell mom and dad about my early stuff, and they would just say, well, you were dreaming, or it was a nightmare. And well, a nightmare I have every night from 5 to 9, and one that I can function in, and one that I can sit up in bed and move around. And I mean, you guys have already heard the myriad of all that stuff. I just, I wasn't buying that, but that was always my most potent memory. And I told my wife the other night, I feel like for me that, and here was the reflective bit in this. The more I thought about it, the more I wondered, this wasn't easy for me to come to, but now it's easy to relate it. You wonder what's the drive, and you say, the drive is, I want to know what happened to me. I want to know what this is. But the more I was honest with myself about why was I so incensed about hoaxes? Why was I so driven to find out why did it lead me to, at one point in my life, an obsessive state? I think, again, that might have come out of anger. Because when you're a kid, your memories are supposed to be of happy things. They're supposed to be of vacations you take with your family, or your grandma and grandpa, and I have all of those. But when I compare the vividness of those memories of going fishing with my pop and going down when Nana would make cookies or something like that, they're not less important, but they're less vivid than the weird experiences that I had as a kid. And that pisses me off, that is in the fore. And so you almost feel like something has robbed you of, it has injected itself into the memory of being a child. And so you wonder, as I go forward, I think I can safely say that, just say as a teenager, heavy metal, leather jackets, jeans and boots and all of that kind of stuff. And, remember the little nylon patches back in the day? You kids won't remember, but back in the day, we used to get covered in patches with your favorite bands on them and all that kind of stuff. And the little round buttons from the 80s, everybody remembers those. Well, in going forward from that, it's just kind of, I look at how I grew up, and I look at how some of my friends would love to go out and party, as they used to say. They would go out and get drunk, or they'd go out and smoke weed, or they'd go out and do this or that. Later on, it was, hey, let's go to a strip club, or let's do this. And I was never interested in getting wasted. I was never interested that much in, a strip club once in a while as a 20-year-old or 18-year-old. Yeah, sure. Once in a while. But when you hang out with musicians for the most part, they like to cut loose, they like to have fun and all that. And I was always like, I think I just want to go fishing. I think I just want to go, kind of go paint, or I want to go draw something, or I want to sit down with a pad and an airbrush or something. And so I felt kind of like a young, older man. Like I wasn't interested in, tearing up the town. Not that I didn't do my fair share of tearing up stuff in my youth, but nothing like what other kids did. And I wonder, was that all a product of having these terrifying things as a kid? Like, does that make you grow up faster? Does that make you less likely to have reckless abandon, I guess, in the way of fun? Like, I would see some people's sense of fun as like, you could kill yourself doing that. I'm not doing that, which in some cases is true. And don't get me wrong, we're all guilty of doing stupid shit in our youth. I did plenty, I got caught drinking, and, I got speeding tickets, and, I mean, all the typical stuff. But in comparison to other kids, I was pretty reserved. And I don't know, did I miss out? I don't feel like I did, but, there was a lot of times where I just kind of felt like a third wheel. I'm like, I'm not really into doing that. I'd rather just go home and draw, or I'd rather just go home and play guitar for a while, or I'd rather do this than go out to a bar. I don't know. That kind of got me to thinking about my life as I grew up. Like, did it actually take something from me in that way? And I guess maybe that's where some of my drive comes from, is like, you're not going to make it pay for it. It's kind of a stupid way to look at it, but I can't deny how I feel about it. And that's what it is. I feel like I need to know, because I felt like this has taken something from me. And now later in life, I realize that it actually has given me, I guess, more than it took. But what it took was a valued thing to me. Like those young man and those little kid memories are kind of tainted for me. And that aggravates me. That'll piss you off. And so that may be part of that. Bob asks me, how much do you feel that this phenomena, Bob. Bob says, how? Okay. 3, 2, 1. So Bob here says, how much do you feel that this phenomena, or any, has influenced your artwork or music? Artwork, I don't think at all. Music-wise, when I write stuff, let's just say a lot of my my stuff would be decidedly non-metal-ish, although it's always going to have that injection of that. But it is rather, musicians will know what I mean when I say, I use a lot of open chords, and a lot of those things sound very airy and ethereal sounding. I like that sound. And I've often sat down and tried to, like, if you could write what it's like to see a ghost into a piece of music, what would that sound like? I've thought about that. I've kind of played around with ideas, but a lot of stuff that I write has that kind of airy feeling about it. Whether or not that's related, I don't know. I don't ever feel like I've been inspired to write something musically that, like, somebody directed me to write. Artwork, I don't think at all. But I'll tell you what is kind of maybe connected, or at least I feel like it is, and this is all I can say about it, is it's a feeling. 5 to 9 years old was my nightly episodes of something coming and putting lights around the room, and the weirdness that I've described before. My, I guess, artistic bend started towards the end of that. I always drew, and I always had a kind of an aptitude for visual stuff. But at that point, it really erupted. And it erupted to such a point that Mom and Dad kind of started enrolling me in classes for painting and drawing, that I was in classes with kids that were like double my age. And then later on, it was G&T programs and summer places that I would go to, like a college and study when I was in like 10th or 11th grade. I'd lived there for 2 weeks, and we had like really in-depth, intense art training and illustration and that sort of thing. Everything sort of erupted out of those experiences. Like, there was this surge that I can definitely notice that happened in the course of those kind of winding to their end, which I've described the ending at 9 years old, that was when all of that came up. So I don't know, did that do something to me that then made me into the creative type? I don't know. Maybe it is some effect to that. Maybe it isn't. But some part of me says something about that sparked the creative fire in me to do that. So maybe that is, or maybe it isn't. But directly, have I ever done anything inspired by this? Not particularly. Some of the one music thing that I wrote that we played on the show episodes now ago, that was kind of inspired by the Mexico City sighting. I think the piece that I wrote was 7/11/91, which was 7/11/91, which was the mass sighting in Mexico of the silver discs during the eclipse. So that was written about that. So anyway, well, let's go to Sadie here. She's asking, you had drawn the man with the walk hat. The man with the walk hat is actually an alien. I mean, for all intent and purposes, that's what it looked like. Your classic gray. Except he had a hat on that looked like a wok lid. It was kind of a bronzy, goldish color. Coppery, I guess, more coppery than anything else. And you can find that on another episode. You can hear that whole thing where Jeremy and I talk about our own personal experiences. Way back, actually. But at any rate, I've talked about that ad nauseum on the show. Most of you guys know what we're talking about. She said, you had drawn the man with the walk hat lid and posted it on the board some time ago, but said it wasn't really as accurate as you'd want it to be. I've never been artistic, but even if I could draw, I wouldn't be able to draw what beings I have seen. The fact is, I can't recall them except for the most basic details. I've often heard others say they have not seen an accurate representation of the alien face. Why do you think this is such a hard thing to get down onto any medium of any kind? I think, and you'll hear that a lot, actually, out of experiencers is, well, that's really close, but it's not quite right. There's something not quite right about that. And I think the reason for that is it is on the edge of your perception. And I think it's very hard to bring something back out of that. And that immediately got me into thinking about, psychedelic experience that Terence McKenna's talked about and other people have talked about, that, it's hard to get a signpost down to say, I'm here, they're there, I've got to remember this, because some of these things are very fleeting. I don't know the reason why I could draw, my work office space with gruesome detail, but these things that have made such a visceral impact on my early memory right up into adulthood, I can't seem to capture something about them. There's some detail that is missing, and I don't know what it is. But anytime I've ever tried to draw these things in any kind of really, that with that same excruciating detail that I become obsessed with in any other piece of art, I can't seem to get it. And the only thing I can say is, because the experience is on the limits of human perception, I think that's why some people have a hard time even remembering things out of that. I remember a great deal, but there is still things I don't recall. Why is that? I don't know why that is. A lot of people will, in the literature will say, well, they put a screen memory over, or they erase your memory, or this, that, or the other. Well, my answer to that is, if they're going to put a screen memory in, or they're going to make you have some kind of instant amnesia, why would you remember anything at all? Everybody says, well, we've got a highly advanced race here that's dealing with us, and so they're able to manipulate our minds. Then why are we remembering anything? That's the question. It's absurd as the alien doctor thing, aliens traveling across light years to get here to operate on us with a scalpel or an anal probe or whatever, right? I mean, it's equally as absurd. So I don't know what the hindrance is, and that I can sit here and picture one instance at Christmas or near Christmas time, seeing a face outside the window of a second-story building. My condominium, I was on the second floor. I remember seeing there is one outside the window of my bedroom and seeing it. I can picture that very clearly. I can picture one that I saw in the hallway very clearly. The one at the garage, which was half there and half not, very clearly. And it was more ghost-like. I can picture that in my head with every bit of detail that I can muster. But to try and sit and draw that, I know it would be a useless effort, because there's always going to be some little detail that's not quite right that I just can't get. And I've thought about the expressions. I mean, people often claim they're expressionless. I don't necessarily agree with that they're expressionless. I think what we try to do is, maybe this is the answer. Maybe the answer is that we're trying to draw the expressive feeling that we get from them. And somehow for us, that translates onto some kind of emotional, visual thing that we get from talking to anyone on the street. You know, you make someone laugh, you see anger in their face or joy or whatever. And we kind of feel these certain feelings from these things, but it's not reflected in this facade or mask that they wear. But yet we try to draw that into that. Maybe that's what that is. I don't know. Maybe that's the disconnect. So I don't have necessarily a great answer for that. It's just it's something I've heard a lot of experiencers say, that they just can't get an accurate, or have never seen an accurate depiction of what they say. So I can totally relate to what Sadie's saying there. I don't know. The only thing I can say, it's the limits of what you can perceive, and so therefore it's hard to even hold on to the memory at all. That's something I think a lot of people tend to lose in the translation of explaining an episode that they have, is that you're talking about something that is so on the limits of your perception, yet you have a memory of it. That memory is still going to be, I don't want to say nondescript, because they're emotionally powerful, they're visually powerful, but you're not in the moment like you're in the moment listening to this show, where you can look around your room and describe what's on the wall. It doesn't work like that. Marguerite, I hope I'm pronouncing that right. You seem to be on the fence as far as collecting evidence of these sorts of experiences. Dr. Cokejohn seems to be a highly valuable resource in this regard. Would you ever accept samples from someone else, a listener, for instance, for testing? I'm not necessarily on the fence. I think it's a worthwhile pursuit, but I'll tell you why I've got kind of a it's not a defeatist attitude, but it's kind of like we've tried that already feeling about that. Although it's been a long time and things have changed in the world a little bit as far as collecting forensic stuff. Back when, Lee and I were doing a support group thing and talking to different experiencers and going on these cases to talk to people, you'd hear a lot of them say, I set up a video camera, and in the middle of the night, look what happened. And you see them in bed snoring. You see something happen with the camera. You'll get like a blurb or a glitch, or back then it was tape. So you had some kind of head tracking problem where you'd get that white fuzzy line that would drift through the picture, and you might see some kind of, not movement in the room, but you'd see a little bit of a change in the lighting, maybe a brightening or sometimes even a darkening of the room. And then they'd get up and turn the camera off, and you'd watch them do this. And I can't tell you over the years how many times I've heard people say that. I got up and turned it off, or the camera shut off. I have not heard, in my experience, it may be out there, but in my experience, I've never had somebody say, I remember them being in the room, I sat up, I looked at them the whole bit, and then saying to me, there's nothing on tape but me sleeping. Which, you know what that means. That means in the sense of a physical reality. It didn't happen that way. It happened some other way, or it was a dream. And the people that I often spoke with would be all too happy to regulate it to a nightmare. They would be all too happy to say, yep, I just dreamed it. Wow, what a relief. It wouldn't have been the kind of thing like you have with a lot of people today who are just adamant that this is what happened to them and there's no other explanation. Most of the people I talked to were perfectly willing to hear something else. In fact, I think some of them wanted it more than the unknown. So, as far as forensic stuff goes, as I said to Tyler on the show last week, is it something that can hang around? That's my big question. I don't buy the ETH. That doesn't compute to me as far as what we know and what we see out of this phenomenon and the behavior that it exhibits when people see these things. What makes sense to me is that there's no nut or bolt in our hands at this point in time, because that nut or bolt may be real, but it can't last here. In other words, why do UFOs show up suddenly and don't stay long, but rather vanish or zip away? And maybe it's because they can't stay here. It can't exist here for that long. Or if we're the source of it, and it is some collective manifestation that is, breaking the chains of the chains of the collective psyche, it can't hold, and so that's why these things blink away or zip away or disappear altogether. If you want to go back, to Bentwaters, if you want to go back to that. You've got an object that looks like a winking eye, and it erupts into these little balls. It blows up, essentially. But Colonel Halt said that when he was watching it, it looked to be weaving through the trees under intelligent control of some sort, and all of a sudden it just breaks into all these little pieces, and it's gone. What kind of evidence would you get from that besides a radiation reading, if there were such a thing associated with that? We've heard both sides of that story, so we don't, you don't know, but you don't have a piece of that object that hit the ground that you can pick up and put in a baggie. And as I said to Tyler, how many times do we hear, which we always think is a lame excuse? See, this is another thing that I started pondering and looking back over the years. Like, here's evidence. I've got it. It's in a tube. Here, it's in a lab. And then all of a sudden it's gone. It's not in the tube. Where is it? Well, I don't know where it is. I thought you had it. I don't have it. It was in the tube. Where is it? Right? It's like a Seinfeld moment. But I think we're all too ready to jump on, there must have been an agent working and he took it because we can't have that evidence because the government's concealing it or what have you. Or it never existed at all and it's all a fake. Now, there are some cases out there, one in particular that I can off the top of my head, that said they had all this proof and it's all disappeared, it's all been lost. That's a little more suspicious to me than some other cases that have had physical evidence that has come up missing. A little different. Is it possible that the physical evidence in the canister is there, and then after time elapses, it's not there anymore because it can't be here? I wonder what a forensic examination of something would entail if it's not stable. How fast would you have to move? You don't know. I don't know. That's an up in the air thing to me. I think it's a worthy pursuit to try and get something, but short of swabbing the inside cheek of an alien being, or whatever, swabbing directly on the object that you're seeing in the sky if it lands, how are you going to get something? It's tough unless it interacts with the environment in a really profound way. It puts a handprint on something or it puts fingerprints on something. You can study that. I don't know. It's a tough call. It's a tough call. I think it's worth doing, but I question whether or not we can do it. And you don't know until you try. And so the answer is we have to try to keep doing it. And maybe at some point, like Tyler says, we get lucky and something does end up staying and we do have something physical to look at. So I'm not on the fence. It's just I've been around long enough to know that we've tried this. People have tried this for years, and it's really, really tough. And it's super aggravating to the experiencer end of things because, at least in our group, I was telling people, look, here's what you have to do. Sterilize your baby food jars, sterilize a jar, have these around, make sure they lock tight, make sure they're airtight. Try to keep them as pure as possible. If there's something on the carpet or something on the wall, I hate to tell you, but take the paint, dig into the wall, don't touch the sample, take the wall and all, take the carpet and all, cut the carpet. These are things that, like Tyler says, it's a Nobel Prize sitting on the carpet. Well, you're going to cut the carpet. End of story. You're not going to try and pick it up off the carpet with your fingers because then it's contaminated and then you're damaging what evidence you do have. So, we tried that and nothing came of it. Especially, what's prevalent in my mind is the video thing. That is what happens, and that's been talked about for years. And firsthand, I can tell you, I've seen those kind of tapes. So anyway, moving on to Guy. I remember a while back you had tried to take a break or quit this subject, and you seem not to be able to stay out of it. I know from listening and reading your post the reason you exited years ago, but with all you and Jeremy have done on Paratopia, could you walk away from it now as easily? And then he's got two more after that. Could I walk away from it now as easily? No. I think it's just about impossible to walk away from it. And I question, when my son gets older. I mean, right now he doesn't have a lot of interest in it. I'm glad of that in a way, because he's creative and he's into computer engineering and computer science and all of that, and he's into his video games and hanging out with his friends. That's the stuff you ought to be doing, right? I told him last night, I said, I don't know that I can recommend that you look into this, because once you do and once you realize what's going on, it's very hard to look away at that point. And this goes back, to the same old adage. Some doors, once you open them, you can't close them again, or it's really hard to. To deny this to yourself once you've seen it is tough. I mean, I did it, but it's always, it's always right behind your ear waiting. And every once in a while, regardless of how you ignore it, it will still poke you every now and then just to remind you of what is there. And so once the elephant is in the room, it's very hard not to notice the elephant. I don't think you can walk away from that. I don't. At some point, if Jeremy and I decide to, it may be that we, fold up Paratopia and say this is all we can do for now. There's nothing. I'll put it this way: I'd rather fold it up and go into hibernation than to start doing repeat shows or to start, chucking out crap that just doesn't matter. When it stops being productive is when it stops. That would be my answer to that. And at that point, I just go on with my life until there was something more to say. Why do you think you keep coming back? Guy goes on to ask. For that simple reason that, you can walk away from it, but both times in the recent history when I try to walk away from it is when something presents itself that's highly interesting. That's one thing. You get when the O'Hare case broke, I was going off to write the book. Like I was saying, look, I can't be involved in this message board anymore. I really can't do photo analysis anymore because I really want to do this book. Because I can type all this out on the internet and I can do podcasts and I can do all, I wasn't doing a podcast then, but I can do all this stuff. And ultimately that stuff will be lost. If I do a book, then a book will stay around for years. And maybe somewhere down the line, long after I'm gone, somebody will look at that book and get something out of it. Maybe there's some stupid little thing now that doesn't mean anything to us, but in the future, somebody may open that book and go, look at that. Whereas the internet message board posts drop off and podcasts, they cease to be hosted anymore. And they only exist on maybe ultimately on one of your jump drives or something that then gets overwritten. I think there's a permanence to a book that's what I wanted to do. Okay, I back out. All of a sudden, O'Hare is boom, and there's O'Hare. And so you go where you have to go. I mean, that's where you want to be, right? So you want to be where something is happening, and you want to dig in. That's what you do. So there always seems to be something that pops its head up when you're trying to back out. And I don't think that's just me. I think that's everybody that has to do with this stuff. I think everybody gets dragged one way or another, which may be part of it, or maybe just be chance that I'm, picking out of the air. But it certainly seems to work that way. It certainly has seemed to work that way for Jeremy and I on this show. We try to go a different direction with the show. That doesn't work. And all of a sudden, boom, here's something else in our lap. And then looking back at O'Hare, and I look back through my own history with this, and every time that I've tried to kind of back away or go a different direction, something else kind of pops up and goes, look at this. So it does have that kind of hook in the mouth type of feel to it, at least to me. And then Guy goes on to ask, is it really that hard to steer clear of for you? No, it is. Like any mystery, it's addictive. I mean, there's no question of that. I'll freely admit that to anybody. It's extraordinarily addictive because you're like a vampire with the knots. Isn't that what it is? Or is it a witch with the knots? I don't remember. But, you become obsessed with trying to untie the knot. Like, what is this all about? What is this all about? And I think that's just human nature to be like that. I think even in my days of being completely disconnected from it, about once a week, I would go to, probably back then it would have been sightings.com or something like that, to read about like what is going on. Is there a sighting here and there? Maybe I'd go to the National UFO Reporting Center and see what was going on. I always kind of kept my eye on it, but I didn't engage anything. I didn't go to meetings anymore. I didn't investigate anything. Lee and I were pretty much, Lee had kind of moved on from it as well. So, yeah, it's hard to steer clear of. Yeah, I'll say that. Mm-hmm. It's really that hard because it becomes a part of your life. And as I said at the beginning of the show, I think that's kind of the thing to be wary of. And I think, coming up on my 45th, I wish my 45th birthday in April, looking back and saying I've spent more time poking around in this in my life than I haven't been poking around in it. And going, wow, compile all the time together, compile all the times that you've sat looking at photographs that either pan out or at best become, I don't know what it is. Interviewing people is always a blast. Talking with people, hearing their stories is always great. That's valuable because you're not only hearing about a story, but you're making friends, you're talking to people, you're communicating with people, you're throwing around ideas. That's good stuff to me. But how much of that was spent arguing? How much of that was spent debating? How much of that was spent just out and out fighting with people online about this stuff? And you realize that, your life's going by and you're spending a lot of it in abject aggravation at this thing and the people in it. Is that a wise way to spend your time? And anymore for me, it's just like, no, I choose not to. I'd rather look at the stuff when it presents itself than I would, aggravating myself and trying to talk to people who don't want to understand things or don't want to see that a certain aspect of this doesn't pan out the right way or certain facts aren't correct or whatever. Like that's, and even when it comes to presenting new ideas, banging your head against the wall of what has already been laid long before you showed up on the scene that you don't feel has a lot of value, and maybe we should look over here, and then getting that flack for that kind of thing. Like, you realize you're spending a lot of your life in this debate, and after a while, you just realize it doesn't matter. There are other things that are far more important than that, and one being looking at the phenomena closer and forgetting all of that, but the other half being this is your life, As far as we know, it's one spin. How do you want to spend it? What do you want to do? This is kind of what I've been thinking about more lately than anything. So let's go to Barb. Barb says, I know you've exposed a lot of your story in interviews and message boards, but is there still more that you have not talked about? Not being an experiencer myself of any sort, I can't imagine how you continue to immerse yourself in this subject if it's all about the more you give, the more you get. Yeah, I've said a lot. I mean, there is some stuff that I don't really bring up. Either because I find it, grossly uncomfortable. And that's not to say there's anything, anything that you guys would probably be surprised at. It's just stuff that I don't really want to think about for the most part. But is there still more that you have not talked about? Yeah, there is. I don't think anything that it would be so impressive. No. I think the majority of the stuff, I think the pinnacled stuff is what's important. I think if you went into every little excruciating detail of every little thing that you see, it's absurd. It would be ridiculous. And I think that some of that stuff just doesn't matter. I think a lot of that is tangential phenomena. Is the way I used to look at it. It's like, yeah, the light in the room, the little ball of light that you might see flash in the hallway or something like what we see here at the ceiling, that seems to be a tangent of some sort. What it is, I don't know. Should that be the main focus of what you concentrate on and try to ponder? No, I think what you should ponder are the pinnacle things, the big events, the big scares, the big epiphanies. That's what I think you have to focus on. And I think I've done the majority of those, more than most people. And I've always tried to not make them believable. In other words, it's all or nothing. And I mean, for my money, if you're going to talk about this stuff, you either spill it all unvarnished, no matter how weird or stupid it sounds, or you don't. And, I've been made fun of because I'm sitting in the computer room one day with my wife, and a piece of potato falls on my thumb or on my hand or on my leg or something from the ceiling. And I'm like, where in the fuck would that even come from? Like, where would that come from? I said, is there even potatoes in the house? No. Well, what is that? I mean, that kind of thing. Am I going to pay $1,000 to have that potato analyzed? I don't know, but I've got it. I've got it. And yes, it is in one of Dr. Coke John's tubes now. It was in a Ziploc bag. I mean, it's clear don't get me wrong. It's clear that that's what that is. But where did it come from? I mean, could the dog have gotten into something? I don't know where she was at the time, but I don't think she was in front of me, and I don't think she spat on me. I don't know where it could have come from. But there is something as dumb as that I mean, that's the kind of thing you bring up. And that's the kind of thing, that's the first thing people will latch on to beat you over the head with. Well, so be it. If you have to do that, that's what it is. I think to withhold the weird part is to miss a crucial point of what's going on. I think that the details are what is at risk here. And especially when you start talking about the hypnotically retrieved scenario stuff, that's where it starts to get really unfortunate, because I think there's probably been a lot told to researchers in that venue that has gotten chucked out because it doesn't fit into the preconceived notion of what they're going after. And if we could get some of those details, I'd be highly interested to see, has anyone else seen a white square that's spun at their face and whited them out? Has anyone else woken up with black sheets and a blue light on them? Like, that's just weird. But, I think I've had one email exchange with a guy who said, I used to wake up with a blue light and black sheets. One guy in my 25, going on 26, I think, this year of this, one guy. I mean, one guy. And it's on the net, and people who are interested in this stuff, they were going to eventually come across this. I mean, I don't know. But it's, and in answer to your second half here of not being an experiencer, but you can't imagine how I'd continue to immerse myself in this. For me, it is the more you give, the more you get. I think that still is holding true for me. How do you continue to immerse yourself? Again, because you can't look away. I think it's the same answer to the question before. How can you steer clear of it? And this then reminded me of a post that I used to get on ATS of, this guy, when I was describing a couple of my experiences in this, because I did eventually get asked, why are you so tough on people about hoaxes and, what's your story, what's your deal? You're here all the time. You're really passionate about this. So there's got to be more than you're saying. And so finally, I just said a couple things. And that was a part of my involvement in this that people didn't know about there. And when I said it, the one guy said, "Man, I'd give anything to have experiences like that. I long for that kind of experience." And no matter what I said, he absolutely could not see the aspect of how debilitating it can be, I guess is the way to put it. And that, what you actually have to get over in order to function anymore after something like that. That's what I think is tough for people to get a handle on. And it doesn't get easier. I don't think that, I think you can get past certain aspects of it, but I don't think that you can, at least, and this is just speaking for me, I don't feel like I can function better, when I had the alien thematic going on. I don't think I could ever function better at one point or another. And like Jeremy has said to me, you've seen this stuff since you were little, and at some point, doesn't it get better for you? Doesn't it get easier for you? And no, it doesn't. No, I think if an alien or a UFO or something presented itself tonight, I would still duck and run. As stupid as that is, I probably would. I mean, I'd probably try and film it with a camera or something, but I would keep my distance. I still don't. I still have a fear of it, so that's still there. But in a certain, I don't know. It's tough to describe. Like, people can't imagine. Like, if this scares the shit out of you, then quit messing with it. Quit, looking for it. Stop looking up. They got a point, but there's some part of you that is drawn to it like that you've got to know. And I guess the question is, how much does that overshadow being afraid, or does it in normal day-to-day life? does your involvement in it overshadow, or your curiosity or your desire to know overshadow what that may bring on, is the best way to answer that, I guess. Anyway, Katya, I hope I'm saying that right, Katia, Katya. I get the sense that you walk a fine edge with ufology as a whole. You've contributed to shows, interviews, message boards, and done lectures, all of which are in support of a ufological community inquiry. But you seem to keep a distance and sometimes outright attack some works. I know there's a lot of differing views. Do you feel there is no common ground? I walk a fine edge with ufology as a whole. Yes. I think that to call it a UFO community or the ufology thing, I think that's way too broad. I think there's all of these little factions of people looking into this, you know. And I think for some people it's wish fulfillment. I think for some people it's, you know, delusion, or I want this to be the answer. And for some people it's open-ended and they just don't know and they're perplexed by it. And then they try to find the connective tissues and that sort of thing. I think Jacques Vallée is the guy for me that kind of does that. I think George Hansen is another guy that, for me, doesn't get nearly the credit that he should get, in my opinion. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, he should be every bit as big a name as Jacques Vallée. I think he's brilliant. And, but those are guys that are going beyond, you know, the thematic of the UFO or the ghost or any of these things. They're looking at parts of this that, you know, it's easy to look at the shiny coin or the diamond in your hand, but, you know, what's holding it? How does it there? What's holding it together? That sort of thing. This is where these guys go in completely different directions. And they find interesting things. And I like to think that's what we try to mimic or try. That's the road we try to go down. When I see stuff like, you know, pseudo-contactee stuff and, this whole X-Files, you know, Cloak and Dagger, Dungeons and Dragons for adult stuff. Like, that's a whole nother area of it, which I don't even consider to be part of it. I think the people really looking into this in a big way are it's a small bunch of people. I think that's always going to be the minority. I think more people are attracted, UFO interested public are more attracted to, you know, the Disclosure Project and exopolitics and all that sort of thing. Like, that's what they're attracted to because there's something there that they can become involved in, like I've said before. I think when it comes to saying, hey, I don't know, but look at this. Isn't this interesting? They go, yeah, that's neat, but where's the flying saucer? Give me the Reader's Digest version, you know, all that sort of thing. Impatience, you know, it comes down to impatience, and we're a society that wants answers, and we're a people who are into instant gratification. And clearly, this is not about that. This is about working and thinking a lot about not only what surrounds it, but what is it doing. You know, Terence McKenna, again, is somebody who really looked outside the box as far as the UFO thing and what is it doing? How is it working? What is it doing to people? That sort of thing. And Jacques Vallée being another one. But I seem to keep a distance and sometimes outright attack some works. Yeah, I attack some works. I used to a lot more than I do now. I think, you know, if you wanted me to lay a bet on what's been the most disruptive force in understanding experience or phenomena or parts of how the UFO phenomena work, I would have to say that the whole hypnosis thing has really been a detriment to progressing this or trying to understand it or even trying to, I don't know, differentiate someone who may not be involved in this in any capacity at all versus someone that might have something weird going on or something unusual happening. Like it might even get that bad to where that line is so blurred that it's indistinguishable. And so therefore the work that comes after that is what's been born out of a faulty tool in the wrong hands with a preconceived layout underneath of it. That seems right to whomever's doing it, I suppose, if that's how that works. But any way you cut it, I think that's been the most detrimental part to all of this. You take that, and then I'll put it to you this way. You want to do a comparative thing? Lay something like that next to what Ted Phillips does. Ted Phillips going out, collecting trace evidence samples, photographing the area, collecting control samples, and collecting samples from inside an affected area. Staking out Marley Woods, this sort of thing, and now compare that to another investigative angle, which would be the hypnosis thing. You see what I mean? How lopsided that seems? What Ted is doing is adding value. The other one seems to be floating in that, is this fantasy? Is it not? Is it a worthy pursuit? Is it not? Is it helping people or is it hurting people? It's all of that. That just seems wrong to me. It's always seemed off, and I think that's why the bottom fell out of it. I think that more and more people are noticing now that we don't know the totality of what the experiencer phenomena is, or even, is there a scenario? Is there a typical event? And I think, if you ask me, I think the answer to that is probably not. It's probably more tailored and probably a lot more subjective than we were allowed to think. It's also I've said this and I will say this until they stick me in the ground. It is far, far more weird than any of these people have ever written about in a book. It is far stranger than that. Whitley has been the only guy who's said and really driven home that point. And so he deserves all credit from me for that it is the most bizarre experience. It's more bizarre than you can imagine. Which may go back to another question, and keeping your wits about you. If you're in that bizarre situation and everything is so chaotic and ridiculous at some points, how do you go, let me swab your cheek? How did he have the composure to say, let me smell you? We joke about that, but how do you have the composure to do that? I mean, if in fact that actually happened, I'm pretty amazed by that you can have that kind of composure in that situation. That says something to me. And then we have Cynthia. Says, how has your experience with skeptics been? And then she put in parentheses, note that I am aware that you've done some debunking with IIG West. And yes, I have. The experience with skeptics, I mean, that's another thing that sent me down memory lane. I remember talking to some people not even knowing they were skeptics, like Russ Estes, who was a great guy. Had a lot of phone conversations with him. I mean, he listened to what I conveyed to him. I told him what had happened to me. And when I asked him, what do you think about that? You've talked to me now. I get a sense that you know a little bit about me. What do you make of that? What do you think that is? And he just referred to me and said, I think you need to watch the movie Phenomenon with John Travolta. And so I don't think that meant that he thought I had a brain tumor, but I thought he meant, essentially, this is all in your head. And as of now, I think as of then, I knew that simply couldn't be the case. Too many people around me were seeing odd things. So he definitely listened, and certainly gave me good advice as to how to investigate and how to ask questions. He really pounded home, it's all about the quality of the witness. Look at the person before you listen too hard to what they actually are conveying to you. Get the story, but then start looking at what kind of person is this. And that's meant a lot over the years, I think, for me, because then when you start really looking at people, you start getting a better feel as to what is that person about. And then, too often I think we hear in this field that, well, they have no reason to make this up. Well, there's all kinds of reasons why people make things up. And some of them are deep-seated reasons that we'll never quite understand. Some people it's for money, some it's for attention, some it's for all sorts of reasons. I definitely think if you come out in this field, I think that there are things to lose. Lisa and I have lost friends over the years, not only because I talk about this stuff, but because the people in our house have seen things that they didn't understand and then were terrified by and didn't want to be around us. That's been the nature of this thing. I haven't had a problem. I mean, I'm an artist, so they expect you to be weird. I'm allowed, right? So that hasn't been that big a problem. No band has turned me away because, that's the guy with the aliens. They don't care about that. But I can imagine if you were a lawyer, this could be a problem. I can imagine if you were a judge or a policeman or something like that. Although the policemen are now starting to talk about this stuff a little bit more than I ever remember them doing. But skeptics, if they're an honest skeptic, if they really want to know or they really want to uncover something. I mean, Derek Bartholomew is somebody at IIG West who I've known for years now, and he's a good guy, and he's my friend. And I haven't talked to him in a while, but we had exchanged a lot of data back and forth about the Meyer case way back when, and that's what she's referring to, I'm sure. But I know that Derek at very early on when we were talking a lot, he didn't realize what I'd experienced. And I think he might have heard Jeremy's Culture of Contact show where he interviewed me. And I remember him calling me up and saying, I didn't know you had all that happen. And I said, yeah, I did actually. And he says, that's really messed up. And I was like, yeah, some of it is. Yeah. Yeah. But that was about the extent of it. I don't think that he believes that that's what happened. I believe that he thinks maybe I'm confused or maybe something else happened or maybe I'm misinterpreting something. But I think, for my money, I've tried to be critical of stuff, even my own. But there just comes a point where you have a hard time doing that, there comes a point where you go, yes, there is something weird going on. I can't keep denying this, and I can't keep trying to explain it when I'm not reaching anything. And I've said before, even if this comes down to something in the mind, or some collective unconscious, which a lot of people, they don't like that. They want it to be something tangible and solid and all of that. And even if it's not, I still find that equally as fascinating. Of what potentially is a byproduct of being alive in this world, or a collective thing that people experience that is not a tangible object. That's still, right? I mean, how is that not interesting? How is that demeaning to this discovery? It's not. It's still equally as bizarre and crazy and compelling. So, I think Derek approaches things far more honest than any skeptic that I've met. He is very big on the Jenny McCarthy thing with vaccinating your children. And the way I understand it, maybe I don't understand the whole story, but that, she believes her son developed autism by virtue of a vaccine. And so she said something, obviously one time against vaccines, and he is kind of taken it upon himself to build this site about here's why this isn't this and this and that and the other. And he gives very factual data on why vaccines are important and why, this is, you shouldn't listen to Jenny McCarthy for care of your children is, I guess, what he's saying. But I think that's worthy. I think that's worthwhile to to dispel things that don't make sense in the way of medicine and science and that sort of thing. When it comes to UFOs, I think the case that we worked on, yes, I think that needed to be laid out on the table. I think if he were to, and again, I think he approaches it from this standpoint of, you hate to see people get taken advantage of. You hate to see people get disillusioned or fooled. That could ultimately be to their detriment. And that should be the reason that most people speak out against whatever in a skeptical way. It should be because I don't want people to get taken. I want people to realize you should get your children vaccinated against measles or smallpox or whatever, chickenpox. You should do that. That there is no correlation between these things. And if there is, it's excruciatingly rare. Because your kids will die if they don't get immunized against the things that we can immunize against. That's a given. When it's to the detriment of people, then I think debunking is good. Where I don't think it's good is where, let's say, the Loch Ness Monster. I've seen debunkers tackle into that and really lay it out on the carpet. And I'm like, if people want to believe there's a monster in that lake, even if it's a log or something, what's it hurting anybody? If they want to do, if they want to spend several thousands of dollars to troll with sophisticated sonar in there, so what? Why don't you just let them alone? Why don't you just let them do it? If people want to skywatch in an area that has, some kind of UFO activity, what's the harm in that? Why can't you go look? That is, until someone starts a cult of the Loch Ness Monster that then demands, all sorts of bizarre control things over people. I mean, that's where it gets out of control. That's where things start to go awry. And that's where it becomes an issue of caring about people getting screwed over. But I think a lot of the fundamentalist skeptics, I just can't abide by. I think that is that's dismissing it without even looking. And I think some of what we've seen on TV from debunkers on talk shows going up against people who've experienced things genuinely strange, I think they've been really lame in recent years. I expected more. I don't personally, even though I had Dr. David Clark on the show, I think he's a great guy. Do I think that what the guys saw at Bentwaters was a lighthouse? No, I don't. No, I don't. I think they experienced something strange. Do I think the story's gotten muddied? Yes. Do I think some of it could have been misinterpretation? Yes, because you get excited when you see things you don't readily see, and that can breed panic, and that can breed, that can do all kinds of things to what else do you perceive around you that all of a sudden then takes on a weird quality. Hype. You can get yourself hyped up pretty good when you see something genuinely strange. Then all of a sudden, well, what else is strange? Then everyone's listening for the bump in the night. But no, I don't think it was a lighthouse. And I think that's a really lame-ass answer for that account. And I'm speaking strictly from Colonel Halt's standpoint. I don't know. Skeptics are a mixed bag for me. I've dealt with a fair number of them, and some of them have not been able to answer my questions, and other ones just get nasty and I cease talking to them. I think Derek is the only one that I've been able to talk to and get really forthright answers out of. And so that's why I think what he does is a little different than someone who doesn't look into anything and just out of hand dismisses it. So there's two sides to that, just like there's two sides to our side. However, when it comes to the fundamentalist skeptics, which, I found leads all back to that secular humanist thing and all of that. Again, can you call all secular humanists of that vein in that way? No, you can't. But that fundamentalist skeptic attitude of, I don't want to hear it, la, 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 and rarely look into it in any great depth because they never refer to the current stuff, which is something I've found over the years is really prevalent. Like, they will bring up stuff that is long since even out of fashion in UFO circles and hold that up as something that's been explained. Well, what about this? What about this? What about that? And there's really no, and I haven't really looked into that one yet. Well, how about getting on the stick? But you don't hear much of that even anymore. It's just poo-pooed away these days. I don't find a lot of it all that challenging to what we see going on. But I think this field needs to do a much better job of informing itself and getting real about, I guess in particular about sightings, because that is probably the most prevalent thing that people report is a sighting of something strange. I think people should be getting a little bit more schooled in, not knowing what we have, that the government may be testing first of all, but, a flare on a balloon. Or one of these little winky LEDs on a balloon. Let's start looking at this stuff and calling a spade and being done with it. In a way, I agree with skeptics in the sense that immediately when someone sees something in the sky they can't explain, the first jump will be, it's a UFO, which doesn't necessarily mean they think it's alien. It's a UFO. Well, now let's pull that back a second. Let's just look at what it is first and see if somebody's just having some fun or whether it's, Chinese lanterns and all of that. And I've seen over the course of the past couple of years that people begin to get this hatred towards the Chinese lantern explanation, just like they got hateful about the answer of a CGI. There is a lot of people doing CGI hoaxes out there. It's a way to test how good you are for some people. Like, how many people can I fool with this? Visual sophistication is not great, I don't think, as far as this stuff goes, in the way that people see something and they get a piece of footage, and first of all, they don't know how the camera is reacting to what it's recording, and so they see this and go, wow, look at that. Well, that may not be what the eye saw at the time, but look at it on video and it's a completely different story. And immediately it's like, there's no way that's an airplane. Well, yeah, way, and because this effect of a camera, or this effect of movement of the camera, or this effect of, the exposure, or the lens, or the blur, or whatever. I mean, there's a billion different things. So I think we need to get a little bit sharper on that end and on our side of the fence. And but that's tough to do. We're not organized like a skeptics group is. See, this is where ufology lacks. There's not organization to it. It is very hodgepodge, and it is factional. Whereas your skeptics kind of are all banded together and very organized and methodical. And, that's why, as George Hansen says, there's more funding for that. There's more, they tend to operate with more. I think that's true. Anyway, John said, I found an old ATS thread where you spoke of writing a book, and this was years ago. And it was years ago, John. I was wondering if it's out and I missed it. And you didn't miss anything because it ain't out. It isn't even done. If not, can you tell us when it would be available, and could you possibly read something on it from the show soon, just a preview? Yeah, I can do that because I got a lot. But the problem with that is that I'd really like my book to have some kind of, punctuation at the end. And I just can't find it, to be honest with you. I mean, maybe that is the end of the book, that there is no punctuation. I think there are points I can make in it, But as I learn more as time goes on and more things come to light, then that becomes another chapter. So it's like everything that's unfolding is still unfolding to a certain degree. Either it's things I'm learning or experiences that happen. And so, it's been really hard for me to write it because I'll write chapter 1. And then after chapter 1 is over, I go, okay, let me get to that, because that's the second thing that I remember going on. I don't have notes anymore, remember, because I got out of this. I dumped everything. So I'm doing this all from memory. And it's not easy. And and so at that point, I'll be to chapter 3 and I'll go, oh, wait a minute. All the way at the beginning, now I forgot to put that in there and I really should work that in. Well, then it becomes a mess. So that's frustrating. But as things keep going on, and this is not a book just about my experiences. This is also going to be about interactions in the UFO community, because at the point where I was talking to MUFON groups and going to DC to talk to experiencer groups and all that sort of thing, you interact with certain people and you meet certain people, and the only thing I could say about the UFO thing is I've met a lot of names in this field, and some of them are impressive people, and some of them aren't. And I don't know that I'm going to name names, but I'm going to definitely say what I think about my interactions in this community and how it doesn't do itself a lot of favors. And so there's going to be a whole side story of finding out, going out looking, meeting people, talking to people, getting involved, to talking to other people about their experiences and so on and so forth, and how that kind of plays out. Because my history in this thing, for instance, you have an experiencer group, and there are tensions that arise in these groups. As George says, none of these groups tend to last very long. I definitely agree. And the question is, what will be the start of that? Where does that originate from? And then where does it end up? And then where do you end up because of it? That's a tough thing to swallow. There's been, I've had some knockdown dragouts long before, I guess, the internet came flying around. With people that I thought were friends that all of a sudden, just took an abrupt left turn, and all of a sudden I was the enemy because they didn't agree with something that I brought forth to the group to talk about. That sort of thing. And maybe in another case, here's another example of that. Everybody knows what I do. Everybody knows that I work in image stuff, image manipulation, compositing, CG modeling, all of that. And so, if Jeff brings forward visual evidence, how do we know it's not fake? And the answer is, you don't. You don't. But visual evidence these days, as I've said on the show, ain't the best evidence in the world anyway. I can tell you I wouldn't fake anything. Not only would I be afraid of the repercussions from this field, which can be merciless, but I'd be afraid of how the phenomena would react to that. Which kind of goes back to the Gulf Breeze thing. If there was a hoax in Gulf Breeze, just say, for instance, something was hoaxed in Gulf Breeze, how do we know that the phenomena's response to a major hoax in Gulf Breeze wasn't to then show up? I don't think that's something you can discount. I don't think that you can say, if I go out tonight and I build a really elaborate model, sizable, and I float it with a helium balloon over my house and let it shoot beams around the neighborhood, and nobody can figure it out, and I've hid it away, and I've scurried it into the back shed before anyone can see, does that mean that in a week from now, something's going to show up and it ain't me doing it? no, that's just like something about that seems really wrong. And like you're asking for a black eye from this phenomena. Like something about that something feels like you get your ass beat for that. That's just a feeling I have. And I've learned to trust those kind of feelings over the years. But so that kind of thing is erupted out of some stuff. I mean, you know, there's been evidence that's come up that I've looked at that people have disagreed with, and there goes that group. You know, it's tough. You know, it's tough to have really long-term associations with groups in this and that sort of thing. That's where it really, I think that's where the fragmentation comes along. And so when it comes to this book, that's the kind of stuff I want to talk about, because I believe, you know, like George, that that's all part of this. And if we can recognize that, is there something that we can do collectively to kind of steer around that, or is that an impossibility? You know, I feel like George would probably say that's all part of how it works. That's the way it works. And he's probably right. But if you recognize the problem, is there a way to treat it? And if that's the case, can the whole field then collectively work better together? You know, something that got brought up not that long ago was in a conversation with Lee and I, like 2 days ago, we were on the phone, and he remembers how we used to think of people who would talk about the good aliens and, you know, the amazing experiences I had with this alien woman with this beautiful blonde hair and all, and we used to like totally discount that. Say that's not it, because that's not what we're seeing. And yeah, I mean, I don't think you can, you know, barring evidence of an outright hoax on you, I don't think that you can look at something like that and go, oh, I'm not buying that. Not anymore. I mean, I think that's been the most radical change for me, is now I'm willing to actually listen to those people to a degree and see what are they experiencing and what is their demeanor towards it, and is that then what's manifesting for them. Remember, it's all subjective. It's all very personal. It's very tailored to you. And so if you approach it that way, is that the way it presents? And therefore, those people aren't telling you an untruth. They're telling you what they experienced. And just because it doesn't mesh with your fear-ridden stuff doesn't mean it's any less real. So all of that kind of stuff is in the book. So you want me to read something from it. So I'm going to read you, well, I'll see if I can get through chapter 1. I'm reading this off a really small screen, so forgive my stammering if I happen to trip up. This is from chapter 1 called When I Was a Child. There really isn't any doubt that children have a much different perception than adults do. I believe the unfettered mind tends to notice things we don't as adults, as the mental calluses are yet to really develop. I can only give you what I perceived at that age, as I don't have anything else to draw on, except a better vocabulary since that time. What points I cannot remember may be a product of my own memory or interaction of something else causing me to forget. I simply don't know. That's a phrase you'll get used to me saying within these covers. As a small child, I was put to bed about 9 p.m. To give you a sense of the room, closet at the foot of the bed, door to the right, window to the left. I would often look at books and play with toys with a flashlight, because what kid goes to bed when he's told? Certainly not me. Towards my 6th birthday, as I was reading in the dark, I thought something was in my eye. It was white, a tiny dot. No matter where I looked, it was right in the middle of my vision. If I closed my eyes, it was still there. As I'm rubbing my eyes, I still see it, and whatever it is, it's getting bigger within my vision. As it grows, I see it's a perfect white square. It's spinning as if on a pinwheel, clockwise and growing. I have to emphasize I was completely awake. The only way not to see it was to look at the nightlight beside my bed, look away, and it's back. Seconds later, I can barely see. It's grown to fill my eyes. I'm panicked, sitting up, and I can only breathe enough to exhale and inhale. My throat is dry, and I cannot talk. All stop. I don't know how it ended, or how I ended up on my back, but I wake up. The silence is absolutely deafening. As I open my eyes, my nightlight is gone, the door is gone, as is the window. My bed sheets are no longer white, they are black, or extremely dark, dark blue. There is no comforter, no puffy pillow. Just a single black sheet stretched tight over top my legs and waist, and a single black sheet under me, again very tight to the bed. There was a feeling of being in a hospital or in an operating theater. There is a blue light shining on me and the bed, as if it's attached to the headboard. This light, the only way to explain it, is it was so intense that you could see dust particles floating in the air. Every fragment of dust falling and tumbling like microscopic snow. I could not move. I could get my neck and head up, but nothing else. Past the light, there was nothing but blackness, like trying to see into a dark house when you're outside in the sunlight. I hear what I can only describe as unintelligible whispering of a few mouths. Other than that, silence. Fear is a lame word. Fear isn't accurate enough, for that matter. Brain-numbing terror isn't good enough either. I don't remember how it ended. I know of no other event in anyone's life that's that intense, and they just fall asleep. But some hours later, I'd wake up, hear my dad snoring, the door back, the windows back, and the nightlights back. That scenario occurred every night, from the ages of 5 to 9, but there were variables. One night, I could actually sit up. I remember grabbing the black sheets, touching them, and saying, "I'm not dreaming, I'm awake," while shaking the sheets that covered me in my own face. About that time, to my left came a pair of hands into the light. They were pale and had semi-long black fingernails. I remember nothing else till I woke up. For years after, I was uneasy around women with long fingernails. Another time, I could see just outside the light, where there were some kind of pipes, well, like pipes, plumbing. I could just barely see them to my right. They seemed rusty and old, somewhat dirty like you'd find under an old sink or laundry room. Yet another time, the blue light was there, but no black sheets, and my door was there. I found myself in mid-conversation with someone small by the door of my bedroom. I don't recall what was being said. The words were coming out of my mouth before I could know what was going on. I was then picked up by that someone and put on his shoulders. But this person I couldn't seem to look at, and I was barely off the floor. He was short. He also didn't walk. He glided. I went out of my room on his shoulders and out to the kitchen. The dog was awake, and we made an abrupt turn to the left and out the front door. I remember it was cold outside, but that's all I remember. I put my hands around his face at one point, and he bit me. There were no teeth, and I pulled my hands back. Those variables in the nightly experience were not repeated. The core experience was fairly constant until my 9th birthday. I had moved out of my little bedroom into a larger one that was used as a game room. Now the door was to my left, Mom and Dad's room just outside to the right, bathroom at the end of the hall, windows at my right. My 9th birthday party ended towards dark. Everyone left, and I got to play with all my toys until bedtime. Mom tucked me in, and I read some directions that had come with my birthday gift I was all excited about. Mom and Dad came to bed a little later, and I was told to get to sleep. They'd caught me up sitting up playing around, and it was past my bedtime. My parents went to bed and lights out. I laid there seeing the street lamp outside and listening to my mom giggle at my dad in their room, my dad making some joke about someone who'd stopped by for the party. Their murmuring was constant. I smiled and tingled inside, thinking I was privy to some secret only they discussed after I was asleep. I hung on every word I could make out, when suddenly there was a flash outside. Storm, I thought? It was nice out when everyone left. Then I noticed Mom and Dad's quiet giggles and talk suddenly stopped. The whole house was silent like death. I sat up and listened, not so much as a snore. "Mom," I said loudly. No answer. "Mom," I yelled, which usually brought my mom or dad out of their sleep and darting into my room. The weird feeling of those black sheets and blue light was thick in the air, but I could move, and I could talk. However, I heard someone's feet on the carpeting coming down the hall. Oddly, I wasn't afraid. I still don't know why, but I wasn't. Through the doorway light from the bathroom, a small man gently walked into my bedroom. I couldn't see much more than an outline. A larger head with a sort of hat on shaped like the hat you see on certain Chinese people, wearing a peasant hat made of pointy bamboo strips. But this was no bamboo. This was smooth and metal-looking and bronze-colored, but the same style of shape. I became a little uneasy, queasy even. "Who are—" I got out before I saw his hand go up to shush me. He shot to the side of my bed, and I turned to face him. I sat up into a kneeling position. He was tan and smooth, very small mouth, very large eyes. I was absolutely fascinated. That's my only word. I was a little scared, but nothing like I should have been. He looked at me like your mother looks at you at graduation. Warm, but sickly warm. He brought his hands up, palms out towards me, like he was saying stop or nothing here. He brought them away from each other, palms together, as if he were getting ready to clap. Then with a quick motion, he did. This was no ordinary applause. What should have sounded like a clap sounded like a gong the size of a house. It was so loud and encompassing. The instant the sound hit me, horrid, hard fear. I went numb all over and fell backwards. I remember nothing else. These events are literally some of the strongest of my childhood. I have never forgotten them, and I can still to this day picture them in my mind as clearly as if they had happened yesterday. I didn't till much later in my life connect these events to anything of an alien nature, nor make any connection to UFOs in general. In retrospect, I thought at the time that they must happen to everyone. I learned one day when I mentioned the events to a fellow student at school in a casual chat that it doesn't. I remember the look on his face. It wasn't long after my birthday that year that I also had my first UFO sighting. I stood in my home driveway looking towards the west. There were, like in most suburban neighborhoods, houses across the street, but behind them, about a quarter mile or less away, a large grouping of woods. I could see just above the tree line a small ball, red in color, that seemed to have a seam around the edge. It also seemed to be spinning. To the outstretched hand, a penny would just about cover it, pretty sizable and clear, and it did not move from its point in the sky. It was a clear, cloudless summer day, and I was outside in the front lawn playing with friends when I saw it. I called to one friend over to see it, and he seemed rather uninterested. It simply hung there, spinning, and I felt as if it were watching me. It then flashed and was gone, but I have to describe the flash, as this doesn't correlate to any flash I have ever seen since. It appeared like a cartoon flash, or burst, akin to when Wile E. Coyote gets crushed on the head with a rock. That spiky, pointed-ended burst, usually accompanied with an emblazoned bonk on it. There were no letters bonk, but the flash looked like a cartoon flash and was solid white with no outline. 5 seconds later, the flash again, and it was back. This continued for about 5 minutes. "What is that?" I asked as I stood there gazing at it. It was truly amazing. My friend didn't seem impressed and went over to the tree where we were previously playing around. "I don't know. You want to go somewhere else and play?" he said. "No," I replied, somewhat irritated that he didn't show any interest at all in even what I saw at a young age as being out of the ordinary. A few more minutes of watching the flash an object, and then it flashed and didn't return. I went inside to see if Mom knew anything about it. I never thought to go get her to see it to begin with. "Mom, there was something in the sky. It flashed and was gone, then flashed back." "Maybe it was an airplane," she cut me off. "Airplanes aren't round like a ball, a red ball," I said. She seemed totally disconnected. It didn't seem as if she were herself, and she certainly didn't seem like her attentive self. Something was weird, and I felt weird talking to her about it, but suddenly weird, like I wasn't supposed to, and almost like I was telling a grown-up about a special secret. That tattletale feeling you sometimes get as a kid. Mom looked down at me completely blank and said, "Maybe it was a weather balloon." I went back outside. I remember thinking to myself, what's a weather balloon? I didn't know, and I doubt many children at that age would. The sardonic humor of the situation wouldn't hit me, nor would I get the quote-unquote joke until much later on in years. There is, however, one loose end besides my mother's inexplicable reply to a question with an answer obviously not understandable to a child. I cannot remember who one of the friends was who was with me at the time. I cannot remember his face, nor where I met him. You want to go somewhere else and play? I think at this point in my life, I'm glad I said no. There were several trips to West Virginia to visit my mother's relatives, my aunts, uncles, and great-grandparents. It was a 5-hour drive, and we'd usually leave Friday night when Dad got home from work around 7. On one occasion, I remember being asleep in the back seat of their 1970 Ford Torino, with my face stuck to that damned vinyl seat. I awoke in the back seat and recall seeing very bright lights through the front windshield and feeling of absolute terror. The radio was screeching very loudly, an absurd noise, and I went to sit up to see what was going on, but I couldn't move. I remember seeing Mom from my vantage point and her mouth saying, "Oh my God," as if completely mesmerized by whatever she was seeing. I don't recall anything past that, only then pulling into a McDonald's to get something to eat, and Mom saying, "This drive is taking forever tonight." Again, I equated this kind of thing to a nightmare as a kid, and perhaps this drive to West Virginia in particular was a dream I had had in the back seat. However, looking back, it seems odd enough and consistent enough in terms of the subject matter to mention here. However, I cannot emphasize enough, I cannot qualify it. There's not much more from the childhood years that I can recall. I don't subscribe to the hypnosis craze of regression therapy to recall anything I don't remember. I don't believe the accuracy is there, nor do I need to recall anything I can't remember. I obviously can't remember for a reason. Good enough for me, as I remember quite a bit already. I have not forgotten them since they occurred, and I doubt that I ever will. There's going to be a commonality in all of the accounts of events in this book that sooner or later you're going to take notice of. Exceedingly high levels of oddness or strangeness. I don't think enough people who experience the phenomenon detail this into their accounts. I'm all too sure, because it makes the experience far more surrealistic than a cut-and-dry story. It also lends itself, I believe, in the mind of the experiencer that no one is going to believe this. I personally think that if one is going to get anywhere with progress in understanding this enigma, or any interaction with the field of UFOs, that one must detail every bit, not just the parts that look good on paper for a believable read. Every part of the experience has to be related as best as one can to give those not having the experience the full effect of what it's like. I can tell you honestly and truthfully, it is inexplicably weird, and I will not shield you from it. And so that's chapter 1, unedited. Trust me, it'll be cleaned up before it goes into a book. But I've got 4 chapters done, and I'm satisfied with the chronology at this point. It's just now to move forward. Maybe I should just sit and write notes before I even start typing. Get everything lined up first. I didn't do that when I started writing this 4 years ago or 5 years ago, or probably more now. But there it is. And ladies and gents, thank you for writing. And I apologize that I didn't write you back. And I'm sorry that it's been so long. I'm sorry you got to listen to a podcast to get an answer. But those were some I picked out that just, when I'm sitting there reading them, for some reason, they just triggered all this, like, again, looking at the whole big, long road that this has been for me in this and how many years have gone by. Some of those questions just reminded me of things that, really kind of took me back. And so it's kind of been a nostalgic ride for me with that. But so thanks for writing, and again, my apologies for not getting back sooner. I'll try to do better with that. And don't forget, we have the live show 10 p.m. Eastern Time Sunday night on www.blogtalkradio.com/Paratopia. Once again, 10 p.m. Eastern Time Sunday night, blogtalkradio.com/Paratopia. Hope you catch that. If not, have a great weekend and a great week. I will see you next week. For Jeremy Vaney, I'm Jeff Ritzman. Night-night.